Today, we're getting into a really fascinating and honestly pretty provocative piece of writing. It's about a very specific group of people in modern India and makes a powerful argument about their changing place in the nation. The title pretty much says it all: The Defeat of the Amateur Indian.
So let's just dive right in with a question the source material kind of forces you to ask yourself. It introduces this very specific type of person, an archetype the author calls the amateur Indian. And you have to wonder, what does that even mean?
All right, first things first. We need to get a handle on who exactly the author is talking about. Because this isn't just a clever phrase. It's meant to be a diagnosis of an entire social class.
Okay, here's the core definition laid out in the source. The amateur Indian is described as part of this once powerful elite. They got the best education, had all the opportunities. But now, the argument is, they find themselves totally incompetent, completely out of step with how their own country actually works.
And listen, we're not talking about some fringe group here. The source makes it crystal clear. This class was at the absolute top of the food chain. They held all the key jobs, all the positions of power and influence, and they were the ones setting the course for the entire nation.
So, the big question is, what defines this group's thinking? How did this huge disconnect even happen? Well, the author argues it all boils down to one thing: the language they think in. And the source uses the author's own life story to make this point. This move away from their mother tongues to a point where they were thinking exclusively in English. Well, that wasn't a unique experience. It was a journey taken by hundreds of thousands of people in India's upper middle class.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The piece frames English not just as a way to talk, but as a complete worldview. The author suggests that for this class, the West wasn't some faraway place. It was like an internal compass that guided their taste in art, their big ideas, even their sense of right and wrong.
And this Western framework, the source argues, created what it calls a colonized sphere inside their minds. Big ideas that are foundational in the West didn't always have a perfect one-to-one translation, making it hard for this class to really get a grip on the nuances of their own culture, which was running on a totally different operating system.
So, how does this internal mindset create a real, practical disconnect from everyday life in India? This is where that label amateur really starts to sting.
For decades, this class could always retreat into their own little bubbles: private clubs, fancy restaurants, literary festivals. But the author's point is that those islands are sinking. The rest of India has washed ashore, and there's just nowhere left to hide from the very nation they feel so awkward in.
And wow, this comparison just lays it all out, doesn't it? The source material paints this super sharp contrast between the amateur, who's totally helpless in a common street dispute, and the savvy local, the son of the soil. One is paralyzed by the system, the other knows exactly how to work it, how to talk to people, and how to get things done in the real India.
So, while the amateur Indian was busy becoming a stranger in their own home, the source argues that the entire country was going through this massive, tectonic shift right under their feet.
And here is the absolute crux of the argument. A new power structure was rising up, but its operating system wasn't English. The new elite, the people with actual economic and cultural juice, were thinking, speaking, and building their world in Indian languages.
And the source says you can see the proof of this cultural revolution everywhere, especially in media. The biggest news channels, the hit streaming shows, the music that actually unites the country, it's all happening in Hindi and other Indian languages. It's creating this massive, shared cultural space that the Westernized elite are almost completely locked out of. So what is the final outcome of this huge cultural and linguistic shift? Well, for the amateur Indian, the author argues it's nothing less than a total, crushing defeat.
This line from the source is just devastating. The author argues this class has lost its private spaces in the malls, in the movie theaters, and even in their apartment buildings. They've lost their solitude, and when they lost that, they lost their social and political footing. They just can't get away from the rest of India anymore.
And this is the final bitter pill to swallow. Their predictions about where the country was headed have been wrong. Their political analysis is seen as totally off base. They're just viewed as being completely out of touch. Their elite education, which was once their greatest strength, now seems to make them less capable of understanding their own country.
And right here, the source delivers its final damning verdict. It basically frames them as a reverse barometer. Their judgment is so consistently off, the author claims, that the truth is often the exact opposite of whatever they believe. And that right there is the definition of an amateur Indian.
In the end, this whole analysis leaves us with this really powerful lingering question. In a country that is changing so fast, redefining itself from the ground up, What does it actually take to be competent, to be relevant, to truly be a part of it all? As this old world fades away, a new India is rising, and it seems like the rules for belonging are being completely rewritten.